Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our session. My name is Ali Raza, and I'm the founder and CEO of ThroughPut, and I'm here with Subhash Chaudhary, who is the founder and CEO of fiChains. Today, we're going to be walking you through a live demo of both systems and showcasing how we help companies and organizations manage operational and financial disruptions. So, as a quick addend, we will try to get this to be done within 30 minutes. I'll do a quick introduction of ThroughPut.ai and fiChains, walk you through the demo, and both the enterprise level demo on the throughput side, so the enterprise demo on the fiChain side. Then we'll speak to how these systems can be connected to bring operations finance into sync to manage operational disruptions and manage some of the ongoing issues with tariffs and supply chains. And lastly, we'll talk about how to get started with ThroughPut.ai and fiChains. Starting with a single product for the sake demo, we'll be speaking to a use case of avocado oil. It can be pretty much anything. It can be gloves, computer chips, you name it. And then we'll open up for a brief Q&A session, right? So to get things started, here are what the two companies do. So ThroughPut.ai, we address operational disruptions. My former background in operations has led this company to look at how to get parts to the right place at the right time, looking at right carrier and right source location and other factors. Subhash's background managing operations and finance for Dell, Apple, on the military side, and Lockheed and other customers that he's worked with helps them address financial disruptions. And so he'll be able to show you how he can go through every single node of a supply chain to see if a product is making money or not, and factor in all the different variables tied to the cost lines. And so if you think about it at a high level for your business, ThroughPut helps improve fulfillment likelihood to make sure you get the parts to prevent operational losses such as sales, uptime, output readiness, whereas fiChains makes sure that you're making money on the product and the delivery of the service and good. And so two very different things, but two very similar things. How the system works, and I'll walk you through a demo now, is on the operations side with ThroughPut, what we're able to do quickly is provide the COO view or the board view of what's going on with all the material flow within your organization, right? So on your screen right now is items that are moving from the endpoint supplier to the plant, to this warehouse, to the customer. And what we do is we benchmark to see if it's getting there at least 90% of the time or more. And if it's below that, then we start auditing, right? Similarly, what our system's able to do is break it down and see what the components are for that delivery. So if it's an inflow problem, it might be a supplier problem for that avocado oil, for example. If it's an on-time problem, it might be a carrier problem. Right? That might be like a FedEx versus UPS problem. And if it's an inflow problem, then again, we can add all sorts of variables, including Subhash's financial updates with everything going on with tariffs to see what's going on. What makes the system very unique is it's a right to left system. So it's operations first. It's looking at that endpoint demand. It can look at any category taxonomy, any individual product, and we'll walk you through one today to show you how this scales from a single product all the way to the top. But the beauty of the system is it can be used to evaluate what's going on at different levels, country, region, city. Now, the blue lines are occurring because it's basically saying that there's not enough data yet to make a decision around it. And that's what also is the system. The system is designed to make sure that even if you don't have a single source of truth for your data, you at least have a singular decision-making point, right? So the way this system works is it takes the demand from the endpoint, looks at your local and global inventories and your suppliers, and then figures out which supplier be audited or replaced, right? Because they're just not getting stuff to the endpoint. And it also looks at items that can be delivered to the endpoint with suppliers that do have the capacity. And again, any permutation of this, right? We don't have to look at the entire supply chain. We can look at the global supply chain. And the other thing it does really well is it looks at inventory, right? So most systems where they get stuck is they'll talk to you from a demand perspective, right? So they'll be able to look at a product and say, hey, we're making margin, the demand is good, and this is the endpoint. Subhash is going to talk more about how he ensures the contribution margin, especially future looking, right? Because effectively ThroughPut uses accounting data. But how ThroughPut manages operational disruptions comes from how it manages inventory. So what we do with inventory is we look 120 out, and how we do that is we look at the volatility in the lead time. So we'll calculate how long it'll take you to get an item. And we'll look at the endpoint usage. Like, what is the true usage? Not the demand forecast. What are we expected to use. And similar to like a Tesla car, what this system does is it looks at your spend, which is the black line for inventory, comes up with the gray area to say, hey, this is our operating budget for working capital. And then looking out 120 days, it's able to say, hey, with this operating view, different groups within the organization can talk about where we're going to land, right? So supply chain procurement is the dotted black line. They think based off of their data, they're going to be within the gray area. The known orders, which is what's coming from the end customer or as downstream as you can get it, that's the dotted blue line. That's where often operations thinks we're going to end up. And then the dotted green line might be the strategy, right? So say you're taking a product out and nobody knows about it yet. It can reflect other things. So obviously, if the items are above the gray area, then what we will have is a working capital issue. We'll need more cash and support to fulfill those orders. And if it's below the gray area, then we're going to have downtime for parts, right? So what can be done from an operational perspective? The system has the ability to see where you're overspending, underspending, and it creates these individual boxes, these recommended orders, as well as recommended dates as the data is reached, right? And that can include financial data, logistics data, a lot of data that sits in your material management system that you can export. ThroughPut can probably put up in 40 hours and show you some of the opportunities to spend more to meet endpoint demand, like on Black Friday when things are selling out, as well as where to cut back where you're overspending. So what this has added to the overall equation, right, is today they can do a plan A, right? They can tell you from a supply chain perspective what is optimal and okay. Most systems, what they can't do today is manage disruptions, right? This is where your overstock, understock, and out of stock occurs. This is where the imperfections are. Our system is very simple, where it's able to go in and at an individual item location level, go in and say that, okay, based off of what's being used and what the lead times are and how much we have, do we need to order more right now or do we have too much? And if we have too much, is there a way to sort of expand and cut inventory at locations where we don't need it? And those dollars can then be freed up to manage operational disruptions, right? So if you're understocked, this system can go in and say, hey, we're in danger of running out. And lastly, to do what we can while we're waiting on funds, this is where rebalancing comes in, right? We're rebalancing. What the system's able to do is multiple locations and say, okay, even though we're in danger of running out of item 85, at a high level where we have too much inventory in this warehouse, we can now move to the out of stock where we actually have usage and effectively meet endpoint demand while we wait for our system. So very robust system from an operational perspective. Think about it as a system that can look ahead and it can factor in every usage. So that's every bump down, every delivery, that's every bump up. And it can look at the future deliveries and orders that are coming in and actual future demand. And based off of that, it looks at the inflow, outflow, looks at the volatility in your lead time, looks at your service levels, and it's able to recommend inventory stockage down to the individual location. So hopefully that gives you an overview of how ThroughPut manages operational physical disruptions in any part of the supply chain during any time period. And now what I will do is I will hand it over to Subhash to talk about how fiChains addresses the other more important piece, which is how do I make money and make sure that we are not running a net loss in all of our activities? So Subhash, over to you.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. And so you saw the view of the entire enterprise supply chain from a physical flow perspective. That's what Ali showed you with ThroughPut. Now, what we're doing is that we're going to put the same content, but looking at it from a financial view for the enterprise. What I'm going to show you now is fiChains view, which is the financial view of the same information that you're looking at, but at an enterprise level, looking at the financial flows, mapping and synchronizing with the physical flows. So let's take this enterprise that we're looking at, which is we're calling it generic Inc. So this enterprise has various product lines, categories, and commodities that they manage. So if you're a General Motors, then you're looking at Cadillac division, the Humvees, the Corvettes, right? If you are a Dell, then it's the computers, laptops, all types of disk drives and displays. So that's what you'd look at. If you're a Nestle, then you got the Nestle Waters and Nestle Coffee, Nestle Chocolate. So these will be the various divisions that you see at this. Okay. So enterprise, then the product categories and brands at this level. Now, you can see the entire enterprise's information at this level. We can actually see what the enterprise is spending on its supply chain, which is the costs with the suppliers, the material costs, the freight costs, the storage, warranty, duty costs, and the total cost that you spend. Okay. The other good thing that we do is that we actually compute the opportunities for savings. That's really where most people are trying to find is, okay, we spend so much at an executive level, we're interested in what opportunities are there for savings. And these are not hypothetical opportunities. This is actually opportunities that various people in the organizations are working towards reducing those costs. You can also see tariffs, for example, here. So what tariffs you're going to pay for this financial week. So I'm looking at the financial week of December 15th, which is starting Monday. This will be the tariff for the. Then there are, like I said, various people working on reducing costs to mitigate the impact of tariffs, which you get to see here. So all of this you can and look at that information in context for the various time periods looking 12 months forward. Okay. So similarly, you can look at the impact that somebody is having as an executive. That's what I want to know is what the people are doing to reduce these costs. So if it's going to increase the cost, it's going to be in red. If it's going to decrease the cost, this is going to be in green. So as an executive, I'm more interested in making sure that we minimize the red and what help the executive can provide to do the improving in the reducing the cost. Information, we can keep drilling down all the way to the, let's say we want to go to supply chain. So we can actually go and look at who are the suppliers who are supplying these products. We can go further down and look at which region are they supplying to, and then similarly go all the way to what mode of transportation that they are shipping those products to. So in this particular case, I'm getting this product, say, from Mexico, coming to North America region for this part, which is speakers coming down to from a Mexico location to Nashville by ground. Trust me. So, and at every level, you're able to look at the information in context right there. It means that everybody in the enterprise is actually having this information and we're all on the same page. So that's the power of what you're able to get to the entire enterprise view. So what Ali showed you with throughput, but now you're looking at the financial information. And the only thing out here that is physical is the quantity that is used to compute these financials. So this is an overview, and we'll give it back to Ali.
Thanks, Subhash. So hopefully so far you've been able to see how throughput can look at a little item within the physical flow, and then Subhash can look cost item and line item inside of the financial supply chain. So Subhash, the big question is, with all the available tools today, there's all sorts of structure, you name it, planning ontology tools, decision intelligence, business intelligence tools. Why is fiChains coming together to solve a problem, and what is that problem? What is currently missing from the ecosystem, which is preventing the ecosystem operations board level from managing things like tariffs and supplies and capacity constraints? Back.
Okay. Okay. That's a really good question, Ali. I mean, this is what everybody is struggling with right now is in the existing process in plan, we finally have the output like what throughput did with the inventory plan. And ultimately, the plan is measured based on how much revenue is contributed and how much margin is contributed by this plan, right? So contribution to margin, contribution to revenue is the ultimate, performance measure, and that's how you get evaluated. So there's one problem with this. The problem that the plans are done for future time periods, but the cost cost data that is used as input to the planning process is historical. And what I mean by that is that data is coming from accounting, which is about 90 days old. It's inaccurate, it's averaged out, and there is no reflection of what the cost will be or into the future time periods. For example, what I mean by that is tariffs are, say, going to be in effect starting January. Okay. Now, which means that if you do nothing, you're going to take a hit on margin. So that's a direct impact of tariffs if you do nothing. So obviously, there are people in the enterprise who are trying to mitigate that. So that new cost data would be important to rebalance the inventory plan. Let's say you have a disruption. So, for example, 12 months ago, last November, everybody was working towards mitigating the impact of the coast port strike. So that was another example that if you did nothing, you'd get an impact on your revenue and margins. So you would have to do something proactively to address the port strike. So that started with last November. Then it progressed to tariffs. So it's a continuous process of costs being affected continuously for the next 12 months, right? So constantly there is a disruption or a tariff impact. This is what is going on constantly in the supply chain. So with throughput and fiChains, the solution that we are providing now is that you're able to get that data that was missing in this planning process for those future time periods to be fed back from procurement, logistics, and finance at a SKU level for the next 12 months. So now your plan will actually reflect what the financial costs will be for those financial time periods into the future. So now you have more accurate costs. Your sell price obviously needs to be increased starting January or maybe now, but you have to know what pass-through cost is. That is also computed within fiChains. This way, you're able to grow the revenue. You're able to find cost savings before the impact already happens. So that is proactive management of the supply chain. And now let's look at how this actually works because that's good. So let's take finance. Finance will be doing tariffs. They will update the tariffs saying starting January, there's going to be this tariff, new tariff, and they update that in the fiChains system. So this is part of the job. This is nothing new that they have to do, but it's an existing job. They just update that information in fiChains. You already have the demand plan. The demand plan is the same plan that Throughput uses for doing all the inventory planning. It's the same input, so we're now in sync with the plan. In the meantime, procurement takes that plan and is renegotiating with the suppliers to figure out how to mitigate the impact of tariffs or disruptions, whichever one that they're working on. Which means that come January, that they're either going to shift supply from, say, one supply location to another location, from one supplier to another supplier, and all those costs are renegotiated by procurement for those time periods in the future. Now, logistics has to also balance their network to support moving those products from those locations to the new locations and ensure supply so that everything gets there on time. What this means that all these activities keep change costs, which means that the costs have to be recomputed. Now, with these costs being computed by fiChains, the difference is that the costs are computed by digital assistants instead of humans doing that work. So automatically, this automation of computation of procurement, logistics, MRP, all of that at a SKU level, aligned at a SKU level, is what we do in fiChains. That information now goes to throughput. So that information now, for each time period in the future, the inventory can be rebalanced and you can either improve revenue and improve margins rather than just taking the risk or mitigating the impact of tariffs. So these are the kind of things that we are providing to throughput. So the combination gives you that new capability that you did not have before. Back to you, Ali. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, Subhas. So I know we just went through a lot of content. So maybe let's simplify it. Maybe just walk through that one item, avocado oil, right? So walk me through this, right? Because again, today, as you clearly mentioned, we are doing inventory optimization with the data that we have versus what might be coming from supplier contracts and what might be happening with finance and policies and tariff negotiations. So walk me through an example, right? So let's say we pick avocado oil. I can enter in any number here, but let's see on a system what that looks like, right? So today, if I look at avocado oil, and it's going to update shortly, like this is my physical supply chain, right? Coming in from parts of South America, parts of Europe, and I'm looking at it from an info perspective, not really looking from on-time perspective, right? But as it looks, this is the state of where we're at, right? If you look at what the breakdown is going to be, I think I'm getting about 275,000 from South America, and then the rest is probably coming in from Andalusia, so that's 58. So let's say it's a 5-to-1, 6-to-1 ratio, right? And obviously my customers are not getting stuff on time, that I'm going to look into. But the big question I have is, am I going to be making money on the throughput system with the data that I have? I have a couple ways to check that, right? I can go into demand and effectively see, okay, looking at my data from accounting, this is what we're expected to do in sales forecasted out, and this is the contribution margin I'll make. So about 4 million in sales and 600K in contribution margin. And then if I go over to the inventory view, right, to see if those customers are going to get it, overall, it seems like I'm going to be okay with the inventory I have on hand today. But today, what it's telling me is across my 3 locations, I should order some more soon, right? I guess it's already ordered. It's already in the past. And this is the recommended order date. And if I look at my currency, it's looking at my static average cost per unit. Again, it's not factoring in tariffs yet. But walk me through this, right? This is where I need to, our system updates the recommended order and stock level. Where would fiChains come in and make this model stronger and effectively answer whether I'm going to make money or not? Back to you.
Share screen. Okay, Ali. Good. So let's actually walk through the next level of detail that we kind of showed you in the beginning. So, like you mentioned, let's look at the category. We're calling it category 1, and this is the avocado oil. That is this category here for this enterprise. And in that category, let's see, you had mentioned that there were suppliers in Argentina and in Spain. We showed on the map. So in this particular example, what you're seeing is you're seeing a supplier 1 who is in Argentina. There's a supplier 2 in Spain, and there's a supplier 3 also in Argentina. So supplier 1 and supplier 2 supply to Norfolk, Virginia, and supplier 3 supplies to Lodge in California. Okay, so these 3 suppliers. So let's take this Spain and look at what supply chain looks like. And I'm just going to it down. So you mentioned one of the items, which was SKU code 8371114. That is coming from Cordoba to a warehouse in Norfolk, Virginia. And it's coming by ocean. So let's start with the lowest level of detail. So now, and what I did was I'm looking forward to January. So this is what the changes that I'm going to affect because of procurement, logistics, all looking at tariffs coming in January, or disruption. It could have been a disruption like the port strike. So there are things that are going to happen. And what I'm looking at now is all the suppliers spend here for supplier 2. And this is the should be cost that we were able to compute and say this is what the savings could be. So for example, there's a potential. So if you take should be, what you're paying, the difference, you will see that there's a savings opportunity for material cost. There's a savings opportunity of freight cost. Now let's go down to the tariff part. So tariffs now this is what I'll pay for tariffs starting January. But if you notice that this tariff is based on this MRP quantity. Okay. So the reason the tariffs, I'm going to show the tariffs here. and you look at the MRP quantity. So I was able to move the sourcing from Spain to Argentina. Okay, so I brought down previously what I was bringing in around 6,000 something or the cases of avocado oil. I've reduced it now to 4,800. So by reducing the quantity that I'm importing from Spain, I'll be paying less tariffs, and you were able to do that and mitigate the impact of tariffs and move it to supplier one in Argentina. Now, now supplier one in Argentina may not have, uh, their costs are going to change there because now that you got more demand coming in into Argentina, right? You might find that the supplier in Argentina has raised the rates. So you're going to offset all those costs. Again, all of that you're able to see right here. So, for example, here you will notice the impact of moving the stuff to Argentina and the costs going up. There's actually an impact of $13,000 for that week, right? For just on that small set of cases that you're importing from Argentina instead of Spain. So you can actually see out here that that move, even though it was tariffs less, but you're actually going to pay more in terms of costs by moving it to Argentina because the logistics costs, the storage, warranty, all of those. And there's another factor that we didn't take into account or not talked about is Argentina has 30% lending rates versus Spain having only 3%. So there's a huge cost of inventory and all the costs are associated with that particular SKU. So all those costs are used to compute the impact. So this SKU level cost now goes back to throughput. And so throughput would know come January, this is what the new cost structure is. And then either we go back and say, well, get it from Argentina or do we get it from Spain? All those discussions can happen. And again, the rebalanced inventory can be rebalanced. So this is the input that we can provide back to throughput for the January and 12 months forward. Hope this makes sense.
Yeah,
Back to you,
absolutely.
Ali.
So to wrap it up, so once you have outputted the updaters, right, and I'll pull up my screen and now we can actually take those numbers and update the actual recommended order and stock levels. So that becomes the new input. And so you can see how this completes the feedback loop. So hopefully from this webinar, what you've been able to see is you can take existing data, often sitting in materials management data from your operations, and enable these sorts of competitive advantage. So I guess getting started with ThroughPut.ai and fiChains, like how do we get there? It's very simple. It's exporting data sets. We map it to our systems. It takes no more than a day to get some of these recommendations up for you to start having a single source to run decisions from. But the beauty is the business impact is very clear. So you can sit down with the CFO and COO within 90 days and say, look, I saved you money, or I've been able to fulfill more of the demand, and I've been able to offset some of the tariffs, right? So hopefully that's been very effective for you to see how both operational and financial supply chains can be in sync using the ThroughPut.ai and the fiChain systems. One is doing more of the machine learning part, the other is doing the AI agents. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. So thank you again for your attention. Could you maybe explain the difference between should be and the original costs on your line items, please?
Sure. So let me just do that, and I'll just show the screen so that you'll be able to follow the numbers. So what happens here is the costs that you spend. It's not just one lump sum, right? It is material cost, it is freight, it is storage cost. Storage cost meaning that's the warehousing costs. And there's multiple warehouses involved. So all of those costs, warranty costs in case of product get damaged or returns, there's high return rates. And then cost, duty costs, sometimes the supplier will pay some. So remember we talked about, when we have that pass through for the cost. So that is where you got to figure out what the sell through will be, whether the duty will be eaten by or you're going to take it, or your customer is going to pay for it, right? So all of those things, this is what you're seeing out here at that broken down level. And each one of these has at least about 100 potential cost details under them. So that's when we say about 1,000 cost items being managed by hundreds of people across your enterprise just for these buckets, right? Now, for the same buckets, the next level with the should be cost, we're actually computing it and negotiated. This is what is computed and said, if you transport it this way, if you bring it by ocean, air, or if you do it by ground, if you bring it in a 40-foot container versus a 20-foot, these are the things that various people use or provide better packaging of the shipments, right? So better shipment, tubing, reducing costs, negotiating, all of that gives you the should be cost. The difference between what you're paying and what should be gives you the opportunity, right?
Gotcha.
So this is thousands of cost items managed by hundreds of people across hundreds of products. So at enterprise scale, think of how many people are involved doing this asynchronously across your organization. Really the details you here.
So Subhash, on top of that, where are they actually pulling, or where are you pulling the data from, and why can't current systems do this today, right? So as you know, many people have spent a lot of money and on the current status quo products. Where do you get this data from, and how do you execute, and how does this augment whatever IT may have already spent money on, right, and to make operations or supply chain better?
Yeah. So this is there is no one system that brings all this data together. The data comes together in accounting about 90 days later when the invoices come in and that. So that's the problem today, right? That we work on the financial system based on accounts receivable, accounts payable, which means that you pay suppliers later, invoices come in and they get settled 90 days later. Same thing the customers do to you, right? You send them invoices, they'll pay you later, and all of those things. So all of these things are not done proactively. They're more reactive just because of the nature of accounting. Accounting is, you can't post sales and all that before actually selling stuff. So that is the challenge. Whereas planning, we're always planning for the future, right? So what happens is systems that are there today are not bringing that future data aligned at the SKU level. Why SKU level suddenly has become important is because in the tariffs case, you have to declare the cost, insurance, freight at a SKU level. These are not three things that you can bring at random later and adjust things like that. At the time of payment, you got to do that. And what we are saying is we're going to plan for it, then you have to know those details at a SKU level versus like the system that you're getting the data at one point in time, right? And that point in time is what you're using for the next time period till you replan with a new set of data. So the systems don't exist. I mean, there is procurement, logistics works at a different grain, finance is in a different grain. But at a SKU level, they just don't come together for the future time periods. They can come together only what accounting provides. So what we're saying is if you want to plan for the future, you want to have proactive impact, you have to be able to use fiChains, this is the first kind of system that's brought all that. So for example, when we go into an enterprise the first time, when you look at that number and say, how did you get this cost? Because that's not the cost we're able to compute, using fiChains. And then the realization comes, oh, we didn't include freight. We didn't do this. We took last year's average. And then you see, how can your plan be based on those kind of inefficient data, right? So that is the exposure. That is what fiChains addresses so that you get contracted data that is negotiated. It's not predictions. This is not prediction markets, okay? This is actual contracted data. That's what fiChains is able to put together. The other problem has been it's very hard to compute all of this, right? So much of math is involved, and every cost item has some some interdependency. So that is the challenge. And that's what fiChains is, put all that knowledge of how to compute the various costs, the interdependencies, cross-functional dependencies, right? Because finance is one group, logistics is another. All those cross computations are automatically done by this digital assistants. That is the power of doing this. Is if you do it manually, you can do it, but it's going to take a very long time, which is why you're not able to do procurement cycles faster. It takes 1 quarter, maybe 6 months to renegotiate everything.
So Subhash, theoretically, this is all great, right? But what has been the financial impact, say the fiChain side, right? Like what have you delivered from a financial impact perspective with customers? Like, and I'll speak more on the throughput side, but like obviously it's a sophisticated system, but what do I get out of this if I'm the CFO at the end of this?
So the first thing is that you're actually getting a actual cost data, okay, which is what is going to happen in the future, right? That's one thing. We can help you do these computations much faster. You can negotiate with the supplier in a very short time frame, which is near real time, meaning bi-directional negotiations or continuous negotiations, right? Which is the other thing is RFPs, which are take cycles. So that's one. So speed, scale, and then the actual computation that gives you the opportunities for savings. So in a summary, you can actually negotiate the cost with the supplier on logistics and have the total cost be effective.
I'll give you some examples from our side, right? So we found like $90 million of efficiencies for like the Metro North Railroad. That's a public study out there in the open, right? We've helped improve aircraft availability by 10%, increase flying hours by 10%. Can you give me some tangible numbers in terms of what impact fiChains would have or has had with your customers, right? Like what is the real numbers, right? Because as you know, many systems out there, they are pitching the vision, but they are aborting the mission. That's how I like to put it, right? So what is the actual deliverables?
Okay.
And
So
numbers
first
that
thing
you
was
achieved?
right. So what we look at visibility, right? First, visibility is very simple to say this is what you're spending today, right? You're spending $30 billion. This is how the money is being spent. This is what it should be, right? Right there, they look at, whoa, how did you figure that out? Well, I'll give you a very specific example. How you transport a laptop, right? You make 1 million laptops. You can transport it by air, right? In a box that is 2 cubic, the change in packaging. That just alone, that one simple thing, in a few months, we're able to deliver $65 million in hard savings without any risk to anything. Now, how do you know that? Is you have to know what all the logistics costs are, how much you're paying per unit, from where you're bringing it, mode of transportation, all of that. So per SKU, you were able to save 65 million doing hardly any risk to the business.
In the interest of time, I guess one more question and we'll wrap it up. What industries should be using this capability now, right?
Yeah. So three industries that are the largest industries that we look at is electronics is the most price sensitive. The second one is automotive, which is like the other one that's had major turmoil right now in the US. Right. The third is the entire food industry, right? The food and like the Nestle's, the CPG industries, where there's a whole transitions from packaged food, pre-processed foods to organic, all that stuff, right? And there's a massive shift because of climate change issues. So these three industries.
From my perspective, probably chemicals is materials is a strong suite. Spare parts management is a big issue right now. So
Right.
we think about those two use cases. Obviously, that applies to automotive and industrial settings and all sorts of other ecosystems. But yeah, I think what we're seeing in the market still is that there are a lot of planning systems, and we all know planning systems have their limitations. But having a little bit of an edge where you can see what's upcoming in terms of procurement and what might be the offsets and how policies are changing is extremely powerful. Again, from our perspective, it's not a solution to all your problems, but it is a competitive advantage to what you have today, right? Whatever you've already invested in, data, infrastructure, ontology, domain expertise, processes, whatever you name it. And so I think that's probably good point to probably end this podcast or webinar with the demo. So thank you again for your time. Again, happy holidays. If you'd like to learn more or have a specific demo recording, it's very simple, right? We can get, and once we get an export of your data within the first week, we should be able to find things to fix. So with that, I'll stop and thank everyone for their time. Thank you again, Subash, for making time this morning, and everybody. I wish you a happy holidays.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you. Happy holidays to everyone. Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you.